This video is sponsored by the Great Courses Plus. At the time of first contact with the Spanish conquistadors, the Aztecs were the most powerful civilization in North America. They were rich, militarily organized, and in constant expansion. And yet, the most well-known of all Mesoamerican cultures was about to meet its end. Let's find out why. Tenochtitlan was the capital of the Aztec Empire. It was a humongous city for the time, with a population of about 200,000 people, with 60,000 people recorded in the markets every day, as their life was very much economy and trade based. To give you perspective, no other European city at the time had that kind of population, with Paris having only about 150,000 people. They had schools called the Houses of the Youth, and they also had teams of public service workers that kept the city clean. They had a house of song, or in other words, public theatre, a zoo and an aquarium. The empire was centered in the Valley of Mexico. It stretched all the way down to Guatemala and had 450 tribute states within its influence and a number of client states, which didn't pay tribute but needed to help to protect the borders. Tenochtitlan was officially established in 1325 and it rose in the middle of a lake. The Spanish called it the Venice of the New World. It had numerous canals and reasonable canoe traffic. It occupied 13.5 square kilometers. It was massive. Originally, the Aztecs were wanderers, a nomadic people that had left their original land, Aztlan, and migrated south. We don't really know why, nor do we know where exactly Aztlan was located, although some people speculate it could have been somewhere in modern-day California. Was Aztlan real? Was it mythical? No way to know for sure. Also because Aztec books were pretty much fabricated for propaganda purposes by the half-brother of King Montezuma I, who had every other previous history book burnt. The Aztec people were very clean in terms of personal cleanliness and, although it might sound incredible, they had the habit of taking water from the nearby springs and sell it at the market. So basically, they drank bottled water. They loved art, music, dancing, which they called singing with your feet, and poetry was highly respected. They were also people prone to war. Initially, they were very popular as mercenaries for other clans until they established their own powerful city using the warrior skills they had mastered to their advantage. They worshipped various gods who required human sacrifices and performed so many on a daily basis that their temples were surrounded by stakes with the skulls of the sacrificial victims attached to them. On the inauguration of the seventh phase of their main temple, between 10,000 to 80,000 people were sacrificed. Early Spanish accounts telling us that there were so many skulls it was impossible to count them. The main temple was about 60 meters tall, and on the top it had two temples, one red and one blue, dedicated to different gods. The sacrifices were particularly brutal, as they ripped off the hearts of sacrificial victims while they were alive. Tenochtitlan was a place of life and death, beauty and brutal violence. The warrior class was huge. All boys were trained to be warriors, both from the lower classes and the upper classes, although the children of the nobles would be sent to specialized schools. Warriors protected the transit of tribute, and their armies were immediately dispatched if an area didn't provide their trade tribute. There were two classes of elite warriors, the eagle warriors and the jaguar warriors. In Aztec society, they would be referred to as one order, which was one of the highest ranking of all warrior classes. Entering to these elite military orders was very difficult. An Aztec warrior, noble or otherwise, would have to prove himself worthy on the battlefield before he could be accepted to the ranks of these battle-hardened full-time warriors. The Aztec eagle warriors had their heads adorned in colorful feathers and shrouds representing their animal symbol, and must have been a splendor for the sight. The jaguar warriors were the sister order of the eagle warriors and some of the most elite warriors in the Aztec army. Their style and uniform was based on obviously representing the jaguar, with the warrior being dressed in animal skins and a helmet or shroud in the shape of the head of a jaguar. The Aztecs were very well organized. They had a wide range of weapons, spears, slings, but what caught the eye and the attention of the Spanish conquistadors was the Aztec sword, which was a wooden bat with double-edged obsidian blades, so sharp that according to Spanish accounts, those swords were able to cut the head of a horse clean. In the next section, we will talk more about Hernán Cortés, the historical figure. We'll talk about the Spanish and how they managed to first defeat the Aztecs on the battlefield and subsequently siege and take their capital city. But before doing that, I'd like to mention the sponsor that made this video possible, the Great Courses Plus. The Great Courses Plus is a very fitting sponsor for my channel and the kind of content I produce. It is a fantastic addition to my own personal academic research because it contains many courses taught by very knowledgeable professors about a wide range of topics, from history to maths, science and much more. Now, through your subscription you get access to their entire library, which is huge. We're talking about over 11,000 video lectures, and that's what really is important that I'd like to underline is these are university level lectures taught by PhD professors. It's really good quality stuff. One of the courses that I've recently been watching is Maya to Aztec, Ancient Mesoamerica Revealed, taught by Professor Edwin Barnhart, PhD. This is a massive course. We're talking about 48 highly detailed video lectures, and the presenter, Dr. Barnhart, is the director of the Maya Exploration Center and holds a PhD from the University of Texas at Austin. Excellent speaker, excellent presenter, very knowledgeable, highly suggested. Now the Great Courses Plus is giving you a great offer with a free trial. It's free, so you've got nothing to lose and everything to gain, because the site really is one of my favorite. And at the same time, by subscribing to the Great Courses Plus, you will be supporting my work at the Metatron's channel. Please visit thegreatcoursesplus.com/Metatron or click the link in the description below to start your free trial today. Arriving after a very long and difficult journey by ship, Hernán Cortés was a Spanish conquistador and explorer who, among others, began the first colonization of the Americas. The governor of Cuba had just sent word that his license to colonize and settle had been revoked, but Hernán Cortés completely ignored it. He first knew about the Aztecs from the Maya, who spoke about the powerful warrior city of Tenochtitlan. Montezuma II was the king at the time of Spanish contact. He knew about the Spanish, he knew about the colonization process that they were undergoing, and most importantly, he knew about the many Spanish victories against other native tribes, which were impressive. They in fact called them Teules, god demons. The Aztecs sent a welcoming party to meet Cortés in the south, sending gold as gifts because they had heard that the Spanish were always asking about gold. Montezuma was happy to pay the powerful Spanish whatever tribute they wanted, as long as they didn't come to the capital. Cortés sent messages back to Montezuma telling him that the Spanish wanted to visit the capital, but the Aztec king ignored those requests, so Cortés marched towards Tenochtitlan. At the time, Cortés had about 700 men, crossbows, muskets, 15 horses and 15 cannons, leaving 100 soldiers to maintain control of the colony of Veracruz. But what kind of man was Hernán Cortés? Studying the historical figure of Hernán Cortés can help us understand how he managed to defeat a powerful empire such as the Aztecs. Now, a lot of people focus on the fact that, of course, the Spanish would have superior technology. They had muskets, they had crossbows, they had horses, they had cannons. So obviously there was a technological gap. It was asymmetrical warfare. The advantage the Spanish had on the battlefield was real. It was significant, but it wouldn't have been enough to siege and conquer a city such as Tenochtitlan. So of course it was enough to defeat other tribes, and that's really what played a key role on the situation, and I'll tell you more about that. But there are other skills that have to do with Hernán Cortés that really help us understand how he managed to pull that one off. Sure, he was a conqueror, a soldier, a builder, a settler, a governor. All of this is Hernán Cortés. However, there are two elements that are critical to understanding how he managed to defeat the Aztecs. Element number one, he had an exceptional charisma. And element number two, he was trained as a lawyer back in Spain before becoming an explorer and a conqueror. And this is critical because his speeches, his ability to change people's mind and influence people with his charisma and his ability to speak to crowds, which he had learned and convince, which he had learned as a lawyer back in Spain, really paved the way for his success. He in fact managed to do what he did because he convinced many local tribes that were already enemies to the Aztecs but lacked the strength to rebel to join him to fight against the Aztecs. So in reality, rather than saying the Aztec Empire versus the Spanish Conquistadors, we should say the Aztec Empire versus the Spanish and a few thousand natives that opposed the Aztecs and allied and sided with the Spanish. Now we'll get into the details of this, but thanks to all of this, he now had the superior technology, he had the numbers, and he had the knowledge of the land and the knowledge of his enemy's tactics. So let's have a look at how this story unfolds. Cortés decides to go to the north. He wants to meet the Aztecs. It doesn't matter what Montezuma II says. He is going. And he's going to bring his cannons, horses, muskets and crossbows to the north, and he marches. So he's going on foot. The reason why he decided to do that is because quite a lot of his men didn't like the idea. And they said, no, let's just go back to Spain. So he burns all his own ships. So now his men have no other choice. As it reaches the inside of the Aztec Empire, he starts convincing other local tribes to join him, to join the fight against the Aztecs. How does he do that? With the basic logic, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. A lot of tribes that were under Aztec controls hated the Aztecs because they had to provide tribute, they would take slaves, people, local men as slaves to sacrifice. So a lot of people didn't like the Aztecs, they just lacked the military power to revolt, to rebel. But with Cortés and his ability to speak, and also his at the time newly acquired wife, who was, I believe, a Mayan. Anyway, she spoke the Aztec language as well, which was used as a lingua franca at the time, similarly to how Latin was used in the Roman Empire. He manages to sway them, to convince them that they need to follow him, and through him they will beat the Aztecs. But not all tribes adhered. In fact, there was one tribe that was particularly problematic. The Tlaxcalans, a warrior tribe, and a proud one at that. Now, given they were the sworn enemies of the Aztecs, so you would think, why would they not join the Spanish against the Aztecs? And that's because the Tlaxcalans, again, they were a very proud warrior clan, but also they didn't like the Spanish either. They had heard about the colonization, they had heard about the fact that that Cortés was building forts, and he was also building towns and churches. He was trying to convert people into the Christian God. So then they did not like that. And when Cortés approaches the Tlaxcalans against other tribes' council, because the Tlaxcalans were quite ferocious, he approaches them, he sends diplomatic teams, but they reject them and say, we are going to kill you, we're going to sacrifice you, and then we're going to eat you. So the Tlaxcalans sent 3,000 warriors, but the Spanish beat them. What happens next really helps us understand how committed this man was to his own idea. He did not second guess himself very much. So he has now beaten 3,000 warriors of the Tlaxcalans. What does he do? He sends the captive prisoners, including captains and leaders of the Tlaxcalans, back to them. And he says, hey, we just want peace, let's fight the Aztecs. So the Tlaxcalans think this guy must be completely nuts, we're going to eat you. 6,000 men this time faced the Spanish in battle, but the Spanish managed to again defeat them with their cannons, with their muskets and with their superior armor, even though we have very little Spanish now. And this is important because it's a very interesting victory that he managed to pull off, because later on, as he will face the Aztecs, he will have the support of thousands of native warriors, which is what allow him to actually siege the city of Tenochtitlan. But against these local war tribes, he did that on his own, with his own men. He manages, and the Tlaxcalans start to think these Spanish people, they must be supernatural. I mean, it's just impossible to beat them. So they try one last time, let's go kill. They ask their high priests, they pray, and they figure out, hey, these Spanish, when they sleep, we need to go there and slit their throat. So they attack them at night. Again, they fail because the Spanish were ready, probably expecting something like that to happen. So that's when Cortés wins their respect, because again, these are warrior clans. So he beat them, he defeated them, he proved how powerful the Spanish were in combat. So now they respect him. And now he's got a very powerful ally. So strong, together with the weapons and military tactics of the Spanish, that Montezuma II starts to rethink his approach. He's thinking, I need to invite him to the city. I need to tell him how bad the Tlaxcalans are, so maybe he will not destroy us. Now, a few deceptions later, a few times Montezuma tried to stab him in the back, didn't work, tried to attack Veracruz, didn't work. So at the end of the day, they accept the Spanish in Tenochtitlan. And the chronicle accounts are very interesting because they tell us that they welcome him as a god. They tell him, welcome home, this is your home. So Montezuma II actually becomes friend with Hernán Cortés. He even learns the names of all the soldiers. So apparently it seems at that time that Cortés has won, he has made it. Also because the Aztecs give him access to 3 gold mines and give him the contents of their vaults. We're talking about 32,000 pounds worth of gold. Imagine all of those riches going back to Spain. He would become a hero. However, something happens. The so-called Noche Triste, the sad night. Now, remember when I told you about the governor of Cuba trying to send word to Cortés that he basically didn't have a license to do all of this, to settle, to colonize, and Cortés ignored him? Well, he didn't appreciate that. And now he hears that he's even allying with the locals, with the natives. So he doesn't like that, and he sends 18 ships down at Veracruz to arrest Cortés. So what does Cortés do? He takes 500 men, leaves 100 men in the capital city of Tenochtitlan to, maintain their presence, and he also leaves a man called Pedro de Alvarado, beautiful man, very handsome with red hair. The locals called him the son of the sun, and he goes down to intercept the ships. He does so, and what's interesting is that these ships had 900 men. Okay, these are armed men, not all professional soldiers, some were just settlers, but they were all armed, and they were supposed to arrest him. So instead of having a battle, he actually manages to convince them. He speaks to them, and he convinces them, you know what, just leave the governor in Cuba. Why do you care? We've got so much gold. Come with me, join me, let's get rich, let's get famous, let's go back to Spain, heroes. So they accept him. He manages to do that. Everything seems to be good, but remember, he has left Pedro de Alvarado back in Tenochtitlan, and this guy, he was brutal, he was ferocious. I mean, the natives kind of liked him, and that's why they start showing him all their sacrifices and all their culture and their things, but things that for them, like the human sacrifice, were good things. It's like, hey, look at the cool things we do for our gods, but he didn't like that. So he decides, you know what, let's murder everyone. So not everyone in the city, we're talking about 200,000 people, but we're talking about everyone in that specific event. He kills innocent people. So they are raged, they are angry, they stop listening to Montezuma II, and they decide to kill all the Spanish. That's why it's called La Noche Triste, the sad night, because they are kicked out. So as Cortés moves back with his now 1,200 men, he sees that now he has been kicked out. So what is he going to do? But this is the part where he's going to utilize all of his tribal friends, including the enemies, the Tlaxcalans, the sworn enemies to the Aztecs, and he will declare actual war. At this point of the story, there will be loads of battles, Spanish ships against canoes, loads of things happen, but these battles probably require dedicated videos. But one thing that is important is that he is sieging Tenochtitlan, cutting off their supply, particularly of fresh water, and he's using now thousands and tens of thousands of natives together with his weapons, and smallpox helps, because remember, the Spanish bring a lot of infectious disease that the natives had never encountered, so they had no antibodies for. Their bodies weren't ready. And I have, if you want to, I'm not going to go into the details of smallpox and the damage it has done and the way people died, because I've already mentioned it in my last video, the top 10 worst pandemics, so you will find a link in the description below. But suffice to say that these 3 things together allow him to breach the capital city. He enters. He has a few weeks of continuous combat where the natives try desperately to repel the Spanish, but eventually they have to surrender. They just do not have the power to stop the Spanish and the illnesses and the allied tribes, some of which even convert to Christianity at this point, because they think that the only way they can survive this Spanish disease is through the Spanish god. The Spanish burn the city to the ground and build over the ruins of the city a Spanish city. Hundreds of years of a successful civilization are now annihilated. What would have happened if the Spanish had never stopped their progress? But probably the Aztec Empire would have turned into a proper empire, meaning a territorial empire, similarly to the Romans. But we will never know. Their civilization, their culture, and their religion are now just echoes in history for us to study. Alright, Noble Ones, well, I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, please remember thumbs up, and if you're not yet members of this community, become a Noble One. Subscribe to my channel for more content from the Metatron. Big thanks to the Great Courses Plus for supporting my channel and sponsoring this video. And remember, the Metatron has spread his wings. Goodbye.